Heading into the final 3 days of 2021, we've got high dew points here in Texas. Let's check it out on that surface map. This map is a close-up showing Texas, but there it is. High dew points 65 to 68 and even a few 70s showing up in the Houston area. But up to the north we have a front. I'm going to draw that on the map. Roughly about like that. You can see the change from 73 around Mount Pleasant up to 59 at Hugo, Oklahoma. Now further out to the west we do have an incursion of some Pacific air, giving us westerlies and some blowing dust. Let's zoom out and look at the national picture. That'll put things together a little bit better. Here you see this Pacific air mass snaking across the southern Rockies, and north of that, some Canadian polar air coming into Colorado and Utah. Out in the Pacific, we've got yet another North Pacific storm system coming onto the California coast, producing rain as well as some snows in the Sierra Nevadas. Winter storm warnings are in effect in the mountains north of Los Angeles, and snow levels are down to 2,500 feet. And winter weather advisories all the way up the Sierra Nevadas. And that's a nice plot from the Weather Service at Sacramento, showing 4 to 6 inches of snow, and chain laws are in effect on the interstates crossing those mountains. And if you want to see it firsthand, there's the advisory from the state of California. They are checking chains between Applegate, California, and just west of Reno. Elsewhere around the country, we have a cold polar high descending from the Dakotas and Montana southward, and temperatures are below zero north of a line from northern Minnesota through northern South Dakota and into southern Montana. You can see how cold those temperatures are, running about minus 10 along the Canadian border. Mild in the northeast states, a weak occlusion crossing the Great Lakes region, and some of that warm air is just to the south, 72 in North Carolina at this hour. And there's the jet stream positions. Let me move this a little bit further north, outlining a long wave trough in the western U.S. and long wave ridging out to the east. So the main jet axis running from Arizona up towards Chicago and Detroit, supporting these southern systems that you see in California and in Texas. Taking a look out in the Pacific and Alaska, Canada, yeah, our weather video does not ignore those places because they do have an effect on the weather in the U.S. So the weather on Forecast Lab does not stop at the borders. There's Alaska. They've had some inclement weather over the weekend. They had an atmospheric river bringing up moisture late in the weekend. Temperatures came up quite high in the Kodiak area, and they were looking at some very heavy snow in the interior regions. And there's another system lined up down to the south. That'll affect mostly the Aleutians, and we have this other system making landfall in southeastern Alaska. Up to the north, some very cold conditions, minus 20 to minus 10. This is not excessively cold. We do tend to see readings like that this time of year, but that does show that the polar air is definitely in place, and some of it filtering down into the prairies where we have temperatures. Yeah, that's going to be colder than normal this time of year. And I would say that minus 40 up here in Northwest Territories, that is going to be on the cold side for sure. And a quick look out in the Atlantic, not much going on. Looks fairly dry out there in Greenland. And going down the Atlantic coast, some snow squalls in Newfoundland, some showers in Nova Scotia, but overall fairly quiet. And a quick look at how winter has been stacking up in terms of precip. This is percent of normal over the past 90 days. Going back to late September, we can see that California, at least the central and southern part, has caught up on their precip, and they're running about maybe 1.5 to 2 times the typical amount for this time of year. Also, the northern plains looking good, the Midwest, but drought problems in the high plains, the southern U.S., and the eastern coastal regions. And of course, the other side of the story is temperatures. These are highs for this afternoon, the red indicating where records for the date are being broken. So a pretty wide swath from Huntsville, Alabama, down to Laredo, Texas, where it's expected to reach near 90 degrees. Another hot day for Thursday in the same areas. New Year's Eve, same story. But we see a little bit of a change for New Year's Day, Saturday. The heat moving into the eastern U.S., near 80 degrees at Augusta, Georgia, and close to 70 in Washington, D.C. And there's a sneak peek for Sunday, things returning to normal as cold air filters in through much of the country. Now this afternoon we are looking at some thunderstorm activity from southern Illinois down through the Memphis area and into northwestern Mississippi. And that's the presentation on the radar composite. Looks like a somewhat disorganized MCS. It's already passed through Memphis, moving into the Jackson, Tennessee area. It'll be in the Nashville area before long. And of course, we have to watch out for isolated storms in northern Mississippi. This time of year, those can rapidly become severe. SPC looking at an enhanced risk in northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, and southern Tennessee. And that corresponds to that same area that we discussed on the radar image. A tornado watch in effect in much of northern Mississippi. And if we look at the mesoscale discussion, we can see pretty clear evidence that they're planning on expanding those watch boxes east and southeast. And the focus is on Boeing segments within that MCS and possibly some QLCS tornadoes. Doesn't appear to be a high risk or anything like that, but would be something to watch. Severe reports over the past 6 hours are very important, and fortunately just one little hail report in southern Arkansas. There's a look at the radar at this hour. Flash flood statement for the area northeast of Memphis, and down here on the southern end, severe thunderstorm warning in effect. So it's these little tail end storms and cells out ahead of the line that are going to be most significant. However, if any cells on the main line intensify and show circulation, strong localized outflow, that kind of thing, that could cause some problems this afternoon and evening. So that cell down here, I'd keep an eye on that one, and of course anything down in this area. Those are some other cells to watch over the next hour. But very likely by the time you watch this, the situation will have evolved a bit. But seeing what I'm showing you here is things to look for using the tools that you have available. Let's take a quick look around the country at some areas of interest. There's the Southern California, Arizona, Nevada area. Yeah, this is showing some substantial upper level flow, gravity waves, mountain waves, that kind of thing. And it looks like we don't have a pure widespread stratiform event. There's a lot of convective cells driving the precip on the mountains. Further up north, it looks a little bit more stratiform. That looks like a deformation zone. Looks like a lot of dry air coming in the mid and upper levels. Yeah, look at Oregon. Looks cold. I'm seeing a lot of snow as well as a mix of low cloud here and there. And Washington in the deep freeze, substantial snow all the way down to the low-lying areas of Seattle. There's what Texas looks like at this hour, tropical moisture coming north. That appears to be the leading edge of that Pacific front, and we've got blowing dust up in the Snyder, Anson, Throckmorton area, just off the southern Caprock. and it's probably a little bit hard to see, but there is some localized blowing dust out around La Mesa. Some scattered thunderstorm activity in the Florida Panhandle and western Georgia. Tropical moisture invading that region. Tropical air also filtering into North Carolina, but eventually we do reach the frontal boundary and we find cooler air up to the north. And we also pick up some clouds associated with that southwest to northeast jet stream. And this is one last satellite photo to show you. Lake effect snows out on Lake Superior, the northwesterly flow, bringing very cold air. Yeah, temperature's about 5 to 10 Fahrenheit. This is a zone of strong cold air advection. And it rides out over the lakes, picks up moisture, and destabilizes. So there are some snow showers embedded within that. So now, hopefully you have a thorough understanding of the weather pattern, and that gives us a good foundation for going into the forecast model sequence. So what we're going to see is a lot of that cold Canadian air moving out over the Great Lakes and modifying and dissipating and not coming very far south. In fact, we've got a warm front working northward out of Texas, out of Arkansas, and pushing north into West Virginia. So that'll keep the southern half of the country fairly mild. For New Year's Eve, another push of cold air coming south, 1030 millibar high. That's getting a little bit stronger than what we've seen over the past couple weeks. The cold air will come into Denver, Des Moines, Chicago on New Year's Eve, and much further south for New Year's Day. And we can see the models here developing a sleet and mixed precip event out around Wichita, Kansas City, Columbia, Missouri, and an MCS developing in that same area being affected by storms today. This is going to be New Year's Day, around midday, coming through Memphis, Paducah, and Louisville. The cold air rapidly moves south, deformation zone up to the north over the Great Lakes, producing snow in Chicago and Detroit. And the cold air keeps coming south on the 2nd. You can see that 540 line pushing all the way to Houston, and by 540 line, we're talking about 540 decameters, the geopotential difference between the 1,000 and 500 millibar level. That's normally about 5.5 kilometers. So this is indicating that air cold enough to produce wintry weather is moving south into Texas and Louisiana. And this is very cold air over Iowa and Minnesota. Cold air also appears to be settling in over the Central Rockies. So that's not really a great downslope situation. A lot of times you'll see downslope developing in this area. It doesn't appear to be happening this time. So cold air in the Intermountain valleys, a lot of the country rather cool. And you can see that 1040 millibar plateau high over Gunnison, Durango, Colorado. The cold air filtering into the northeastern U.S. for the 3rd, a nor'easter right there in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and some snow further inland, maybe into the Boston area and Providence. Now we're starting to get a little bit of a warm-up on the plains, some downslope setting in for the 3rd, but another Pacific system coming into Oregon and Washington. So we will return to the stormy pattern, and we will also return to a warm-up for Texas around the 3rd. Another cold air outbreak indicated for the 6th and 7th. This is a little bit more nebulous, but it does look like a substantial depth of cold air, and 1060 millibar high. Now, that is going to be significant, especially since we're not quite into the crystal ball territory. We're about 180 hours out, so the models should be starting to get accurate around this time. And that could spell a deep freeze maybe around the 8th or 9th. Let's see how that plays out. Yeah, there's some cold air coming south. Let's look at those column temperatures over Oklahoma City. Let's see, 20 Fahrenheit at the surface, coldest air at about 925, and the depth of the cold air up to about 8,000 feet, which is probably moderate depth for cold air, and a big fat 1050 millibar high coming into the northern plains. So it is looking cold about a week from now, except for the southwestern U.S. where things should remain mild. And checking on the European model, in principle, it goes with the same idea of plunging polar highs, but you can see it's not quite as intense. The highest I'm seeing here, about 1038 millibars, so not 1050, 1060. So we're not totally sure what's going to happen just yet. We'll check in on Friday and again next week. And that's all for this edition of Forecast Lab. You will notice that we updated the list of supporters. Some supporters are no longer with us, but it does look like we're a little bit ahead as we have picked up some new fans. So all of you who support Forecast Lab, thank you very much. And we'll see everybody back here on Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.